It's a strange contradiction to commit to an $1,800 monthly rent to rescue your relatives from homelessness, only to have those same family members call you selfish before the move-in date even arrives. Before this conflict, the narrator lived a quiet, child-free life with their partner. They shared a one-bedroom apartment, maintained a steady budget, and had zero outside financial ties. This diagram shows the math of that peaceful baseline. Their $1,450 rent was split precisely down the middle, with each partner paying exactly $725. It was a stable, predictable system. That stability vanished when the narrator's sister-in-law, her husband, and their one-year-old baby lost their housing. Their previous living arrangement ended abruptly, and they couldn't afford to rent a new place on their own. In an attempt to solve the crisis, the narrator agreed to upgrade. They would leave their one-bedroom behind and sign a lease for an $1,800 a month two-bedroom apartment to accommodate the family of three. By signing a long-term lease to solve a short-term emergency, the narrator became legally and financially tied to 3 more people for the next year, regardless of whether everyone actually contributed their share. With the lease ready to be signed, the 4 adults had to finalize the payment structure. This is where the narrator's logic collided with their family's expectations. The narrator proposed a standard roommate arrangement. Since 4 adults would be sharing the space and the amenities, the rent should be divided into 4 equal parts. This chart breaks down the 25. They were providing 2 bedrooms for 2 couples, so the financial burden followed the space consumed. However, relying on mathematical fairness didn't account for the sister-in-law's belief that her status as family should override her status as a tenant. As the move-in date approached, the sister-in-law rejected the 50-50 split entirely. She didn't want to pay per adult or per couple. She argued that because she is a stay-at-home mom with no income of her own, she shouldn't be responsible for any portion of the rent. She proposed a different model, dividing the rent into a 3-way split paid only by the working adults. As you can see on the chart, this shifts the narrator's individual burden from $450 up to $600 a month. The narrator's response was immediate and unyielding. They told her that her lack of income was not my problem, and if she couldn't afford her share of the $900, she needed to find a job. The sister-in-law then played the mom card. She accused the narrator of being anti-family and cold-hearted, using the 1-year-old baby as a way to guilt the narrator into subsidizing the household. The argument was no longer about the total amount of money, but rather whether the narrator was willing to let family pressure override their personal bank account. Despite the fallout, the narrator held firm. They refused to pay what they saw as a child-free surcharge to cover for a relative who was capable of working but chose not to. The narrator maintained that while they were willing to share a home, they were not willing to take on the financial responsibility of a child they didn't have. This conflict highlights the family tax, the idea that relatives who are financially stable and child-free should naturally absorb the costs of those who have children. Being a stay-at-home parent is a lifestyle choice that a couple must be able to afford together. It isn't a bill that can be passed off to siblings or roommates just because money is tight. Providing a place to stay during an emergency is an act of generosity, but expecting a sibling to cover a parent's living costs is a transfer of debt, not a request for help. Familial support works best when there is mutual effort. You can offer someone a roof over their head without being required to set yourself on fire just to keep them warm.